Good morning, and welcome to the Africa Weekly Talk. Today's subject on the docket is about an article published by the German news network, DW, concerning the Tanzanian government banning off the use of Swahili to teach students at the secondary level educational curriculum. This article generated a lot of anger from people of Tanzania, as well as people outside of Tanzania, Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, Zambia, Mozambique, all over Africa. And out of that, the Tanzanian government came out swinging on this article, forcefully denied the article, and said that wasn't the case. And this intent forced the German news network, DW, to also come out and apologize for misrepresenting what the Tanzanian government had decided to do with the secondary level education curriculum. So apparently, they have decided to add English to that secondary level curriculum, which is not a bad thing to do. But this created a lot of buzz and a lot of debate on the social media networks, with some people arguing that it was a good thing to ban Swahili and teach in English. Now, these people are arguing based on the article, even though the article eventually happened not to be true. But the argument was based on the fact that it was a good thing that if the Tanzanian government was going to use English instead of Swahili. And they were basing their argument on the fact that if they learn in English, that opens doors for them outside of Tanzania. But let's not forget that every country educates its citizens for them to stay within that country and help develop that country. No country educates its citizens and expects them to go and live in another foreign man's land. No. So this notion that somehow if you teach them in English, it's going to help them because it's going to open doors for them outside of Tanzania, that is not and should not be the goal of the government of Tanzania. The government of Tanzania's goal is to educate its citizens for them to be able to use that education to help develop Tanzania, period. And that is what every country's goal is supposed to be. No country develops its citizens and then expects that citizens to move out of their country and go and help develop someone else's country. No. So that argument to me is mute. It doesn't even make sense. But secondly, the most important thing about this argument is that if you look at the native tongue of every citizen of every country, when people learn in their native tongue, they can really understand and learn better when they are taught in their native tongue. So that's a plus right there. But the most important thing also is that if you want to learn other people's language, French, German, English, Japanese, or Chinese, or other African countries' language, it's all well and good. But what these students can do is that choose any foreign language they want to study as a second language with their native language of Swahili. That's all that has to be done. This is done all over the world right now. I mean, you go to England, you go to Europe, every European country, pretty much the students at a certain level of their education picks one European or two European languages that they take as their second or third language that they study. So that helps them if they have to move out of their various European countries to the other European country within the EU, they should be able to communicate in that language. But there's also this old colonial mindset among some Africans that if you study in your old colonial man's language, somehow that makes you more intelligent. And this notion is very prevalent on the African continent, that when you speak good English, the so-called good English, Queen's English, that makes you smart or intelligent. But fellows, let's be real about this. Language is just a tool that we use to communicate among ourselves. It has no bearings of a man's intelligence or of man's capabilities of doing anything. It's just a tool of communication. That's all language does. But it's also good if you can speak multiple languages, if you are bilingual, which most people are in this world today. It's all well and good. But if you look at the English language today, the reason why English language today is so popular and it's more or less like the world's language, it's not because of England. It's because of the United States of America. Some years back, about 100 years ago, it was England, because of England had a lot of colonies around the world, and the English were the superpowers of the world at that time. So people learned English because they were able to go to a lot of English colonies. But prior to English being the main language of the world at that time, let's not forget, it was Latin. And Latin was learned and spoken in most countries around the world at that time too, because at that time, the Latins also controlled the world. So basically, in terms of language and what language becomes popular and spoken all over the world, it is determined by which country's language and which country, which is the superpower or the power of the world at the time. That is what it is. If it wasn't for America, which speaks English, we wouldn't be speaking English, wouldn't be the most popular language in the world today. And let's not forget another history of America. In America, it took one vote in the Congress of the United States of America not to speak German. Just one vote. If not for that one vote, the Americans will be speaking German today. They won't be speaking English. Americans will be speaking German today if not for that one vote. So, aside of this issue of the level of intelligence that when you speak a Queen's language and all this, that, it doesn't mean a damn thing to me. After all, Ethiopia, a country that was not colonized, speaks and writes Amharic. Ethiopia speaks and writes Amharic today. Ethiopia still go by the Gregorian ancient calendar outside of the rest of the world. That hasn't made Ethiopia less developed than the rest of Africa. Ethiopia in some ways is even more developed than a lot of African countries who still speak in their colonial masters' language, write in their colonial masters' language, and visit their colonial masters' countries every damn time. It hasn't changed their level of development against Ethiopia. So this issue of if you learn your colonial master's language and it helps you develop all that stuff is baloney. Pure baloney. That has nothing to do with your intelligence. It has nothing to do with your level of capabilities. It has nothing to do with anything. It's just a tool of communicating with one another. Outside of even the Ethiopian issue, the Chinese now, being in a better position right now, have been able to encourage other citizens of various African countries and even European countries, and even in America, where a lot of schools, especially universities, teach Chinese languages in America today and all over the world. Why is it happening? It's happening because of the status of China today in the world. Nobody was learning Chinese in America 50 years ago. What were they going to be learning Chinese for? But today, they are learning Chinese in various American universities because of the status of China today. So if you want your language to become popular in the world, and then you have to correlate it with the level of development. Because as you develop, and as people seek to learn from you, then people will also adapt your language. That is what is going to happen. But it's not just because you take somebody's language, it's going to make you develop, or that's going to make you more intelligent. No, I'm sorry, my brothers and sisters. That is pure baloney. That is pure baloney. But anyway, let's also not forget, like I said earlier, that if you look at Swahili, Swahili was supposed to be the African language, because during the time of Africans coming out of colonization, during the independence era and the founding of the OAU at that time, which is now AU, Swahili was considered to be the language that was spoken by most African countries. So at that time, it was also considered as the language that most likely will become the mother tongue of the African continent. So if you look at Swahili, as of today, as I'm speaking, I think it's spoken in about 200 to 300 million people of Africa speak Swahili, mainly from the eastern part of Africa and some part of southern Africa. And if you look at that, and then you correlate it with other languages spoken in Africa, it is by far the most popular language on the continent of Africa. So if we Africans want to adapt a language that eventually can become an African language, there's no better language to adapt than Swahili. I mean, there's no better language for us to adapt than Swahili. I mean, look, I have a friend who is from Tanzania. And this friend teaches at a university in California, where he goes to military bases, American military bases in California, and teaches the military personnel and American military personnel and contractors who tend to travel to East Africa and other parts of Africa for this military engagement and all that stuff. He goes there to teach them Swahili. Why do you think they are learning Swahili from this dude? They're learning Swahili because if they know they're going to be in East Africa, if they know they're going to be stationed here and there and there, it is better for them to learn that language so that they can also do what? Communicate with the people who live in these various places that speak that same language. So if you look at the notion of language and what is important in terms of helping in your development or helping in your communication and all that stuff, language will always be defined as the tool of communication, but also becomes important depending on the status of that country in the world at that time. So with this issue of the German news media making a big deal of the Swahili, the Tanzania government banning of Swahili and generating a lot of buzz among people from Africa, has also raised the question of the level of thinking of some Africans when it comes to the still colonial mindset that most Africans have in Africa today. This colonial mindset of everything European or colonial masters have to be adapted instead of looking at ourselves as Africans and adapting what is good for Africa, for Africans. Africa is for Africans, and Africans have to start to understand that to develop Africa, we have to look inward. We can learn some things from outward, from outside, but at the core of our level of development is going to come by looking inward, because we have the capabilities to do that. But because of this old colonial mindset that exists within the continent of Africa, that is what is killing Africa and destroying Africa, because we still tend to believe that everything African is not good and everything foreign, European, is good. And out of that, it has put us way behind. Like I said, Ethiopia never and was never colonized, which was a very good thing for Ethiopia. They were never colonized, and they still speak Amharic. They still go by the Gregorian calendar. And what? That thing hasn't changed a damn thing. I mean, we're talking about languages. The BBC have a news network that translates in Pidgin English, Nigerian Pidgin English. Same with even DW. DW has programs that are in Amharic. These are African languages. They are not saying that because the African language, they are not going to do programs in them. They do programs in Amharic. This same German TV network. Same with BBC. BBC does programs in Amharic as well as in Nigerian Pidgin English language. And what has that done? It hasn't changed a damn. It hasn't changed a damn thing. So at the end of the day, it is not about whether you speak this particular language in these terms or that or that. The level of intelligence and capabilities of every country and its citizens is not going to be, it's going to be based more on how they are educated, kind of education they have in these various African countries. It's not going to be based on the kind of good English or good French or good German that you speak. So, fellow brothers and sisters, I hope we will learn something from this to understand that language is just a tool of communication. That's all it does. We use it to communicate. It does not judge a man's intelligence and does not judge a woman's intelligence. It's just a tool that we use to communicate among ourselves. If you can speak different languages, it's all well and good. Yes, does it help in terms of when you are applying for jobs, in various places? Yes, it does help, because everybody would prefer to have people who have bilingual or multilingual skills and so on and so forth. So it doesn't hurt to have it. But at the end of the day, your mother tongue, your native language should be the number one priority of every country. Every country should have their native language as the number one priority, period. I don't care what it is. Your native tongue should be your number one priority, not somebody else's native tongue, not your colonial master's native tongue. And that is where we fall short on the continent of Africa, where we have still been brainwashed and indoctrinated into thinking that everything that is coming from Europe or from our former colonial masters is the right way to go. So, fellow brothers and sisters, this is a short video to talk about this issue. But I hope you guys will take something from this. And if it's Sunday, it's the African Weekly Talk. And now to my fellow American sports guys, today is Super Bowl day. I'm a real big guy, sports person. I'm a Cowboy fan. None of the teams playing is my team. Philadelphia Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs. Either team which wins, I'm okay with it. I don't have no beef in that fight. But I wish all of them the best. And I hope the team that comes out victorious will be the one that plays well today. So, if it's Sunday, it's the Africa Weekly Talk. God bless you guys and have a great week. Thank you and peace and love.